Hello, my name is Marco Nanninga, and in this training session I would like to show you a little bit more about tracking points and how to set them up in Inspect. So to start with, we'll take a look at the documentation where you can find the relevant information. If you go to ats-help.com, you can go to ATS Inspect 6.4, and then under Cockpit Stations we have defining tracking points. And here we have a pretty good visual representation of what a tracking point is. It's a concept that's sometimes hard to understand in the entire architecture of setting up Inspect. So before we start with the configuration, let me run you through this. So what we have to start with is what we've already created. We have a planned areas and cells. For these cells, we will assign stations, which is going to be the next step in the next recording. But before we can do that, we need tracking points. And a tracking point is a physical location where unit information, such as a batch number or serial number of a unit, is captured. That's in one sentence what it is. To show that more visually, so for example, a tracking point can have two or let's say multiple or a single station. A data collect station needs to have a tracking point so that we know the physical location. And an example where one tracking point can have multiple stations is for example, if you are inspecting something, a product, maybe a large product like a bus or a truck, that you do the inspection on two sites at the same time. So here we have the left-hand side inspection and the right-hand side inspection. And both of these stations are assigned to one tracking point. The way you can use that is that in reporting, you can filter on either the tracking point or the stations or a group of stations, or of course on the area of cell. So it just adds another parameter that you can use in the reports to filter out the data so that you exactly see the data that you are looking for. So either for the tracking point or for a specific station on one side of the tracking point. So we're going to use the training Excel again. We are going to create two types of tracking points. One is a barcode, one is manual. And we'll create one tracking point where we are going to do barcode scanning for a serial inspection type. So to do that, we need to go to plans and then to tracking points. It says that I am missing data for one table, so I can take a look and I see that I miss tracking types, which is indeed the first thing that we will add, barcode and manual. And tracking types is just something that you can use to differentiate different types of tracking points. So maybe you have manual barcode readers that are used by the operators. Maybe there are tracking points where the operators actually type in the data manually. Maybe you have inline scanners that are embedded in the assembly line. That's something that you could add here as well. It's just to differentiate between the different types of basically data entry of the tracking points that you have. And then the tracking point itself, we are going to add a final inspection tracking point with the code finins. The plant is Darby, that's correct. Assembly and inspection, that's correct. Barcode serial, so it automatically chooses all the right values for me. And but here you can see that you can change between barcode manual, you can change between serialized and batch. And this is a very important parameter because this is affecting the reporting as well. It would be set to serialized or serial when you do 100% inspection. And batch if you don't do 100% inspection, if you only inspect an X amount of units out of a batch. The reason that this is very important is that by knowing what kind of a tracking point it is, so if it's a serial tracking point, we know that the amount of inspected units is actually also the total amount of produced units, because it's a 100% inspection. And that, of course, is information that we need to do a percentage of first-time right, or defects per 100 units or defects per 1,000 units. And to do those kinds of calculations, those kinds of values in the reports, for a batch inspection, a batch tracking point, Inspect actually allows you to create batches in the system and tell the system how many products were inside the batch. So even if you do only, for example, 10 inspections on a specific batch number, you can tell Inspect that it was a batch of, let's say, 500 products, and then based on that we can do a defects per unit, first time right, and all those kinds of information, and also show a sample size. So for the training we are going to do 100% inspection, so it's serial, and there is an additional option here that's been added pretty recently that is not in the training Excel yet. It's refresh unit checklist when tracking occurs. So what you can do with this check mark is force Inspect to check if there are changes to the existing questions that are assigned to a unit, or if there are new questions that haven't been assigned yet to the unit that you are inspecting, but should be assigned. And there can be a difference between what is assigned to a unit and what should be assigned, especially when units are created a couple of days or maybe even a couple of weeks before the inspection starts. And we typically do that by creating units based on information from ERP or MES. We do that with integration. And what that means is that the operator can just scan in a serial number or type it in, and Inspect will know exactly what the operator is looking at. And at the time of the unit creation, we also pre-create all the questions that are applicable to that unit. So if there is a couple of weeks between the creation of the unit and the inspection, it can mean that there has been a change in the configuration of the questions by a system administrator. So what you could do is, for maybe the first tracking point, or a tracking point where you know there is going to be a bit of time between the last inspection and this inspection, you can enable this option, and it's going to check if maybe answers have been changed to multiple choice questions, or if additional questions should be asked, or if maybe some questions should not be asked anymore. So basically it does a refresh and ensure that the operator sees all the relevant and most up-to-date information. So for the training we can enable it or disable it doesn't matter, but let's enable it for the training so that we can actually automatically pick up changes to the questions. Click OK. It creates a tracking point. I can just close it, and I have my tracking point here. As you can see, we also have the concept of tracking point groups or tracking groups. And what you can do here is you can group obviously tracking points, and that is for reporting purposes. So when you look at certain reports, there will be a parameter, a filter for tracking points, and you can also select a tracking point group there if you want to see information for a specific group that you have predefined. That's everything for today about tracking points. There is more information here in the documentation, and of course our service desk and engineers are also more than happy to help you if you have more questions about that. So again, thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next one.